And thank you all for hanging in there at the end of the day. And I want to thank Rhonda Johnson for the opportunity to speak today. The points that I want to cover are just a couple of things. So if you leave here, the one thing I want you to get is that eyesight is a tiny, tiny thing that eyes do. There's way more that eyes are part of in brain function, and the retina is a part of the central nervous system. So anytime you put eyeglasses on of any sort, or anytime you change the lighting in a room, you're changing brain function. And the second point that I want you to have is that there's internal visual systems, so that what people usually call vision, they really mean eyesight, because it's on the outside. But there's a lot of visual systems on the inside which are still working, and that those can be developed. So for all of you that made it here at 3 o'clock, and me who made it here at 3:05, there's an internal visual system that gets you to figure out how long it takes you to get to this room, what time it is, all those organizational thoughts, those are internal visual systems. And even to drive here, to get here in the morning, you have to sit and plan traffic. How long does it take you to get your children ready, yourself ready, get in the car, drive over here to be here by 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock? All of that's an internal visual system. So 2 points to leave here with. Eyesight's just one little bitty thing that eyes do, and that there's internal visual systems in addition to external. So the whole next hour is on mainly those 2 points. And each person has a unique connection between their eyes and their mind, because each person has a different background. So here in Texas, it's been interesting for me to hear everybody saying ma'am and miss and be so polite. And I had an employee a long time ago that one of the southern patients came and called ma'am, and she took offense to that. And everybody's like, what? They're trying to be polite. They're calling you ma'am. You're an old lady. Why wouldn't they call you ma'am? And she took it as an insult, and everybody was like, what's in your mind that would make you hear the word ma'am and go off on a tangent and get mad at this person? So your ears can also contribute to what you visualize, as do your eyes. And as Mary said in the introduction, one of the things that Mind-Eye Institute works with is the linkage between how your ears hear things and how your eyes see things. Because in a lot of people with brain damage or autonomic dysfunctions or autism or anything where your brain's not quite working the way it should, then your eyes and ears are often disrupted. And I'm trying to have the eye exams expanded to include a lot more testing for this type of thing in patients who don't have normal brain function. So those are the main points. And to reiterate, when you go home, the main points are being repeated. Be aware that each person has a unique mind-eye connection, which allows them to adapt to environmental changes. So you have your body and your mind that have to adapt. And realize that mind-eye connections can be assessed, that's what we do, and they can be modified by customized eyeglasses. So most people think of eyeglasses as something you put on to sharpen your eyesight, but you can put eyeglasses on to listen better and to have the targets that you're looking at pop out from the background. You can use eyeglasses to mute the background so that the targets pop out, or you can have eyeglasses that mute the target, that blur it just a little bit to force you to be more aware of your periphery. So eyeglasses can do a lot of things. And we split it into ABC because for mind-eye connections, what they have to do is they work with attention and awareness, and we'll talk about that later, talk about behavior and comprehension. So now that we've framed the hour, let's see if we can get into some details, like what exactly is a mind-eye connection. So most people, as I said, think of the eyes as this input center where signals come in and then get processed by the brain. And the standard eye testing includes eyesight, Can you see? Yes or no? Which is better, one or two? It includes eye movement, follow this target, watch it, tell me what's happening to it, and eye health. But the brain controls the eyes. So when you're having somebody follow a moving target, it's really their brain that you're asking to do something with. And the brain changes depending on how stressed you are or how healthy you are. So it's all kind of one intertwined bunch of stuff. It's your mind and your body, and they all have to be in sync for your brain to take the time and effort to look at the outside environment and point at things and pay attention and be aware. So the mind-eye connection is how your mind processes and how it tells your eyes what to do, which way to go, what to point at, what to look at. So if you think of the brain, and it's a big giant chunk of tissue, and you pull on it and pull it down, that becomes the spinal cord. And then if you take that same brain and you take a fistful of tissue and pull it forward, that becomes the retina in your eye, the lining of your eye. So there's signals that are coming from the retina and the spinal cord and the brain, all kinds of signaling pathways, and those are what make decisions. So the central nervous system is kind of your decision maker, and it sends those decisions through the spinal cord to the muscles to have actions, or through other things like the eye muscles to have actions. You're pointing your eyes. And there's 3 different ways your muscles can move. There's reflex ways where there's no big brain power, no decision involved. And then there's habitual ways. So if I handed you something here and I said, here, pick it up and read it, every one of you would hold it at a certain angle. You have the choice of holding it flat or holding it up or anywhere in between. But people get habits. So if you've had a habit, you'll pick it up and put it at a particular angle that's comfortable for you. If you're in a room of people with laptop computers, you'll see the laptops look like this, and the monitor part of them, some are upwards, some are backwards, some are toward you. So you'll usually see in a whole room full of people, all of the screens set at a particular angle that are similar. And then you'll see 1 or 2 screens this way or way back, or it's some odd angle. Those are the people with visual problems because it's not a normal angle. By pulling it closer this way, forces your eyes to pull in. By pulling it farther back, forces your eyes to pull out. So you have 3 types of movement: reflex movement, habitual movement, and then voluntary movement. And a regular eye exam usually tests voluntary movement because they say, look here with your conscious attention. It does have reflex movements when we test pupils, stuff like that. So the lining of the eye is a part of the central nervous system, and thus it's connected to so many different things. But in the 1800s, when some of the eye exam was invented, they didn't know all the things that the retina was connected to. So in 1838, the lenses were invented, that little set of lenses, and people would pick it up and put it in front of you and say, which is better, 1 or 2, 3 or 4. But in 1862, a brilliant guy named Snellen standardized eye care. So this was now during the Civil War, and it was when after people started leaving the colonies and going west. And in 1862, so 161 years ago, somebody said we need to standardize eye care, because if you have an eye test in Pennsylvania and you say, yeah, I see pretty well, and then you move to California to follow the gold rush and you say, yeah, I still see pretty well, you don't know if there's a change. So he developed that 20/20 chart, and he did thousands of people and said, well, what I see at 20 feet, somebody else sees at 20 feet. This is the size of print that most people see at 20 feet. And that's what 20/20 means. It's average eyesight. So you can be better than 20/20 or you can be worse than 20/20, but it's a way to measure, and it's a starting point, and it was brilliant in the 1800s. Now fast forward, we're still using the same chart. Now the machine, the instrument in 1904 that was invented held all the lenses, And now it's 120 years later, and we're still using that kind of machine, the instrument. And what it does is it blocks out the peripheral eyesight. So I showed here different versions. So this machine, the instrument in 1904 has been evolving, and now it looks really classy, and it comes with a computer and Bluetooth, so you can sit. And instead of holding the knobs and turning them, you can sit, push a button, and there's automatic lenses that shift around. So it's fancier, but it's still blocking off the side of your eyes. It's still covering up one eye at a time. You're looking down a little tube at a letter that's not moving in a darkened room, and somebody's saying, whatever glass is best for you here and here, now go walk around in a world where everything's moving. And you're not looking at just books anymore, like in the 1800s where the letters don't move. You're looking at computer screens where you're scrolling or you're flipping screens on a computer. And there's so much more on television. Like, they didn't have television and special effects in movie theaters. So what we do with our peripheral eyesight now is totally different than what was done in the 1800s. Yet the eye exam hasn't evolved. And the new studies have shown that the peripheral eyesight, everything that's not what you put your attention on, it's connected to so many brain positions. So here's what people think of as classic eyesight. So here's an eyeball, and obviously you have two of them. But this blue line here, the blue line follows, that's your eyesight. So there's these parts of your brain that the optic nerve goes into, and that's your eyesight, central and peripheral. But there's this whole bunch of stuff down here that was discovered about 50 years ago. And it's connected with posture and balance and gait. So if you think of it, if I were to move over to this corner, then those of you who chose to watch me, whose decision was, yeah, she's not too boring yet, I'll look this way. Your eyes move, your neck moves, and then if I go far enough, your shoulders will move, so your upper body will move. And if I go to the other side, your neck and your shoulders move the other direction. These are the things we measure in patients, like where does your attention stop? Where's your comfort range? If you're comfortable looking at me here, and now I move a few steps over, it might not be comfortable for you to twist your eyes and neck and head. Or you might find that it's not worth the energy involved. So when I evaluate patients, we're looking for what's their comfort range, what's their tolerance range, where are they engaged in the environment, and where's too much activity. So if you just think of even a flashlight, if I had a flashlight and I put it up higher, you'd have to move your eyes up, your chin up, your back up. Your posture is very much linked to eyesight. Yet it's not assessed in a regular eye exam because you're seated and you can take as much time as you want. Think of a driver's test. All of you have drivers, not all of you, but a lot of you have driver's licenses here. And all you had to do was read a letter, like reading a license plate. And you could take as much time as you wanted. There wasn't any reaction time test. There wasn't any depth perception tested. There wasn't any movement, spatial judgment, nothing. There's no peripheral awareness tested. Just, can you see this letter? And even there's a little light, at least in Illinois, there's a little light that flashes, and you're supposed to say, yes, I see it, or no, I don't. But even if you do that, it's all at a conscious level where they say, I'm going to be flashing a light over here, tell me if you see it. So you put your attention on the sides of you. But when you're really driving, all that becomes subconscious, not conscious anymore. So the eye exam just isn't assessing all these things, the postural components that are linked with the eye. And that's about 50 years ago they found all that. Now, about 20 years ago, in animals, they found a whole bunch of other stuff connected to the eye. And those things are connected to sleep and emotional regulation and blood sugar regulation and memories and lots of other things. And then about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, so not very recently, it was found in humans too. So they know there's this connection from the last 20 years. They know there's a connection from the retina through the optic nerve into some place called the hypothalamus. And so the tract of nerve fibers is called the retinohypothalamic tract. And they know that this tract now in humans is regulating blood pressure, blood sugar, sleep, all kinds of stuff. But nobody's bothering to realize, well, if you change eyeglasses, you're affecting all of those places because they're all looking at just that central eyesight. So I'm passionate about having to expand the eye exam because people who have dysautonomia have all kinds of problems there. And people who have brain injuries have all kinds of problems there. And they're just not assessed. So we get people who their eyes are fine, they see great, that's your eyesight on the outside, but they don't get glasses, or they need it for something else, or they get glasses to make them see very sharply, but the two circuits, the right eye and the left eye circuits, don't balance with each other. Or if they do, they mess up the auditory circuits. So there's so many patients we see that have the synchronization of their eyes and their ears mismatched, that it creates confusion in the brain. And once the brain gets confused, the decisions get harder. And what people tend to do is say, I'm not going to bother wasting my energy to make that decision. I'll use my energy for something I want to do. And I don't really have to look around the room. So most of the patients that have brain injuries, they choose to shrink their awareness of their surroundings because it's just too hard to deal with all of the clutter in the background. And sometimes they shrink the awareness just on one side and not the other side. So I've had patients come in and say, yeah, my child acts great in the restaurants sometimes, but sometimes they're like little demons. And I'm scared to go to a restaurant because I don't know which behavior I get today, and Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde. And they never realize that it could be where the wall is. If you're sitting in a booth and the wall is on the child's right-hand side, then their actions are going to be very different than if the wall is on their left-hand side, because wherever the wall is blocking off the peripheral activity. And this is the type of stuff we test for, because once you know which side of space, the right side or the left side, or higher or lower, is hard for your child to process, then you can change the environment accordingly. So just little things. It's just so many visual systems. I'm trying to work with insurance companies because currently there's no particular diagnosis codes when you have a disconnect there. And the one neat thing about being an optometrist is that the eye and the retina has so much going on. There's 120 million sensors in the retina in each eye. And there's a lot of filtering that goes on, so that by the time the optic nerve comes out of the eye, there's only 1.2 million. So you go from 120 million to 1.2 million. And there's all kinds of stuff at the retinal level called retinal processing, which we'll see later. But most people start with just, well, what's the optic nerve doing? It's sending signals for eyesight. So here's those internal and external visual systems, because you can group them then into what's going on. So there are survival functions here, like sleeping, blood flow, breathing, emotions, digestion. And then, like I was telling you here, posture and balance and gait, those come from these ones. And then there's also visual functions that from the outside. So you have, like, you need to scan. That's a whole, they don't test scanning ability in a regular eye exam. And you have shifting your attention. So you could be in a room looking at one thing but listening to another, or you could be looking and listening at the same thing. And we'll get into later how social skills require this. And then, then we also have visual functions needing internal information for thinking, like knowing the main point or details of something, making pictures in your brain, transferring images that you see into words, or transferring words into images. All those are learned skills, and they're all visual. So basically, There's an internal and an external section. The internal section is non-eyesight. They call it non-image forming. And the outside is for eyesight, image forming. And this is a picture that my aunt drew originally in 1992, and then we revised it in 1996. So, it's 25 years later, and they're just now saying, yeah, there's all these other things that are connected to the retina. And now they're trying to do research and prove them. But you can start with eyeglasses and alter them. So think of what the processing is when you read something like this. It says you're on mute. It's the most used phrase of 2020, just 2020. And note that reading it and understanding it is different. So somebody who's learned how to read can read, you're on mute, most used phrase of 2020. But in order to get the joke, there's a whole bunch of memories you have to bring into this. You're on mute, what does that mean? Oh, that comes from Zoom. Why is it the most used phrase of 2020? Because 2020, the world shut down from COVID, and everybody went on Zoom because they didn't go anywhere. So unless you know all those facts in your memories and can bring them back up to your mental desktop to organize them, you don't understand what that's saying. So visual processing is a lot more than seeing. And the word phrase, when you're just learning spelling, that's a tough word because the PHR doesn't, you would do p, h, r, it's hard. So just seeing something is not good enough. When we assess patients at the Mind Eye Institute, we look at all those different visual systems. You have to look at how somebody can look at little scribbles on a piece of paper, how they convert them into sounds, how do they convert them into imagery, and what do they think of them, how there's reaction, and what are they aware of. It's just a lot. So here's that lot written out a little bit differently. The 2020 eyesight is the very end one with the light blue circle on the right. That's your conscious attention. But before your conscious attention is everything else. So the three circles here, the red, green, and blue circles, these are all your mind. And the other ones here, that's your body. So like I said earlier, your body and your mind have to adapt to external signals coming in. So the light comes in the retina, and that's your retinal processing. And then it combines with a whole bunch of other sensory inputs because you have smells and sounds, and all the sensory inputs come together. Those are your outside inputs, but you also have internal inputs from your stomach, your bladder, your neck muscles, your back muscles. So all of those sensory inputs come together, and then there's a chemical shift, so that's your sensory integration. So you have retinal processing, then sensory integration, and then whatever your sensory inputs do, they link then with memories, and you get chemical shifts and muscular shifts, and then all this mental filtering. So that's your visual processing starting, and the visual processing is split into subconscious and conscious. So there's 4 little sections here: the retinal processing, the unconscious sensory integration, the subconscious visual processing, and then conscious visual processing. And it's many, many, many steps. So why eye exams look at just the very last step of can you identify a target without looking at can you even find the target out of the clutter and point your eyes and zoom in on it and then know what it means. It's beyond me. It's the slowest step. So there's a diagnosis code that insurance companies pay for called convergence insufficiency. And it's a code that these people come in and they say, my child has convergence insufficiency. But convergence is a conscious thing, looking at something and converging on it. And it's, again, the slowest level. You have to have all the unconscious stuff first, then the subconscious stuff, then the conscious stuff, and then the convergence, and then the focusing, and then the identification. It's just so many things go on before that. So to get a little bit into the ABCs we talked about before, A can be for attention or awareness. So right now I have an awareness of the room, but way over there I haven't been really paying much attention to because you're way on the side and I've been looking here. So my cone of comfortable awareness is these two sets of pews here, but not way over there or way over here. And then you have a cone of attention within. So you have this big cone of awareness and then a little kind of a tube rather than a cone of attention. So if I want to look at the sunglasses on the man's cap, because that's interesting, they're shiny, they catch my attention, I look and zoom in on that, but now my peripheral awareness shrinks a little bit. And if I were really struggling to see what they are, my peripheral awareness shrinks even more. But if I'm just kind of step back and take the room as a whole, then my peripheral awareness expands. But then there's more, if some of you start moving, it might be irritating and then I might shrink it again. And that's what's so fun about eyes is that the peripheral retina turns on and off because it's part of your brain and not all of your brain works at any one given moment. So we can use eyeglasses to activate the peripheral retina to make your brain turn on or turn off because when you have a hyperactive kid, sometimes you want to turn some of them off. And when you have a child who's completely absorbed in themselves and unaware of what's going on around them, you want to turn them on. So it's really fun that we have a light through which we can see what's going on in somebody's brain and we can measure where's their tube of attention and where's their cone of awareness and what they're comfortable with and what pushes them to the edge. So, and I mean, just think of it. The more stressed you are, the more you shrink your awareness. You know, if you're nauseous, and I have one patient who is a non-speaking patient, and she typed, nausea is my nemesis, and because everything made her nauseous. And when you're nauseous, you shrink and shrink and shrink your awareness. You are not busy paying attention to everything around you. You're trying to survive. And the more you get into survival mode, the less you pay attention, and the more confused your brain is, the harder decisions become, and the more energy that's required. So attention and awareness, there's a relationship between them, and you have to shift. So I'm looking at this man's glasses, but then the wheelchair catches my attention. And now if I have a big awareness, I can shift from one to the other, back and forth. But if I have a very narrow awareness, now I have to hunt. So you get children who have very poor eye movements and they look around and they're moving to see, and it's because their awareness is turned off. So they're hunting. Or they're getting, sometimes you have glasses that have astigmatism in them, and what astigmatism does is shrinks, like a cropping effect. It crops out the top or the bottom or the sides. So there's a lot of reasons why attention and awareness can be altered. And then you have behavior. You know, some children are clumsy, some have emotional dysregulation, some have poor social skills. So it's important for that because of the, again, peripheral awareness. We talked about the emotional signaling coming through the hypothalamus from the retina. And if you change eyeglasses, you alter emotional dysregulation. And social skills, that requires eyes and ears. And you have a right eye and a left eye and a right ear and a left ear. So it's 4 different channels. And then each of those channels has a central and a peripheral section. So there's 8 sensory signals coming in through your eyes and ears, separate from your nose and everything else. But 8 of them. And many, 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 many people with any sort of brain injury can't handle all 8. So they pick and choose and they say, you know, I'll just pay attention to my eyes and ignore my ears. Or I'll just pay attention to details of what people are saying, but not the tone of their voice. Or I'll just pay attention to facial expressions, but not body language, because those take different channels. Body language is with peripheral eyesight. Facial expressions is with central eyesight. Tone of voice is peripheral auditory. And content of words is with central auditory. And there's so many things. And you get these people who are all mismatched. So their sensory integration is poor because there's a mismatch. And that throws a wrench into everything down the line. so then they don't have good attention, and then their behavior is poor. And then their spatial awareness of where people's personal space is poor. And it's just hard. And then you have the C for comprehension. If they're confused about what's going on in the environment, they're not going to always see the big picture. They're not going to always fill in the details. And they're not going to always visualize. You don't know how many people whose reading skills, they don't do anything in their head. Some people hear words, some people hear characters, and other people don't do anything except see the words on a page. So it's too hard for them to read chapter books with lots and lots of details, because to them it's just a sea of words. Other people love chapter books because they paint a picture that they can imagine in their head. So it's the same concept that I've used this example many times, if any of you heard me speak, where a parent will say, write a sentence and then you go out to play. And one kid will say, okay, done. And another kid will say, you want me to write 10 words? That's a lot of words. And another kid will say, you want me to make 50 pencil strokes before I go out and play? That's an awful lot. That's a mean mommy that's making me do that. So it's like, how do you look at a sentence? As one big thing, like one sentence, I'm done? Or 50 pencil strokes? Or 10 words? It can be the same, but it's all how you view it as to how much effort you think it's going to have to take you. And if somebody has had a stroke or some problem and each pencil stroke